The blizzard struck so suddenly that Xavier Johnson barely had time to pull his coat collar up before the snow started cutting across his face like broken glass. He had been riding for 3 days straight through Colorado territory, heading back to Florissant after delivering a herd of cattle to Denver, when the storm descended from the mountains with a fury he had not seen in years. His horse, a sturdy bay mare named Copper, whinnied nervously as the wind howled around them, turning the afternoon into a white void where sky and earth became indistinguishable. Xavier squinted through the driving snow, searching for any kind of shelter. He knew these mountains well enough to understand that being caught in the open during a late winter storm in 1878 was a death sentence. His fingers were already growing numb inside his leather gloves, and ice was forming on his mustache and the edges of his hat. Copper stumbled slightly, and Xavier patted her neck, murmuring words of encouragement that were immediately stolen by the wind. That was when he saw it. A dark shape in the snow, just off the trail. At first he thought it might be a fallen tree or a boulder, but something made him pull Copper to a halt. The shape was wrong somehow. Too deliberate. He dismounted carefully, his boots sinking deep into the fresh powder, and took several steps toward the shape, leading Copper behind him. As he got closer, his heart seized in his chest. It was a woman, half buried in a snowdrift, her dark hair spread around her head like a halo. She was lying on her side, her arms wrapped around something, and when Xavier dropped to his knees beside her, he realized with a shock that she was holding 2 small children, bundling them against her body in a desperate attempt to keep them warm. "Madam," Xavier said urgently, brushing snow away from her face. Her lips were blue, her skin pale as marble, but her eyes fluttered open, and they were the most striking green he had ever seen, even dulled by cold and approaching death. "Madam, can you hear me?" "My babies," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Please." Xavier quickly examined the situation. The 2 children, identical little girls who could not have been more than 3 years old, were wrapped in their mother's coat and shawl, pressed against her body. They were shivering violently but still conscious, their small faces red from the cold. The mother, however, was wearing only a thin dress, having given every bit of warmth she possessed to her daughters. "We need to get you all out of this storm," Xavier said, already knowing it might be too late for the woman. He began to lift her, but she grabbed his arm with surprising strength. "No," she said, gasping. "No time. Take my girls, please. Their names are Grace and Gabriella Knightley. They are good girls, sweet girls." "I will take all of you," Xavier insisted, but the woman shook her head weakly. "I am already gone," she said, and Xavier could see it was true. Her breathing was shallow, her grip loosening. "Listen to me. My husband died 6 months ago, cholera. We were going to my sister in Colorado Springs, but our wagon broke down, our horse ran off. We have been walking for 2 days. "Do not talk," Xavier said, but she continued, urgent despite her fading strength. "They deserve love," she whispered. "A family, a home, promise me. Promise me you will give them that. Do not let them go to an orphanage. Do not let them be separated. They only have each other now." "Madam, I—" "Promise me," she said, and those green eyes fixed on his with such intensity that Xavier felt it in his soul. "Promise me you will love them as your own. Raise them, protect them, be the father they lost." Xavier swallowed hard. He was a 32-year-old cowboy who had never married, never even seriously courted a woman. He lived in a small cabin outside Florissant, working odd jobs and breaking horses. He knew nothing about raising children, let alone twin girls. But looking into this dying woman's eyes, feeling the weight of those 2 small lives shivering in her arms, he found himself saying the words that would change everything. "I promise," he said. I swear to you I will raise them as my own." The woman smiled, a beautiful, peaceful smile that transformed her face. "Thank you," she breathed. "Their birthday is June 10th. Grace has a small birthmark on her left shoulder. Gabriella is left-handed. They love stories. They love singing. Tell them their mother loved them more than life itself." "I will tell them," Xavier said, his voice rough with emotion. "What is your name, so I can tell them about you?" "Genevieve," she whispered. "Genevieve Knightley. Tell them I will watch over them always." Her eyes closed then, and her breathing stopped. Just like that, she was gone, a small smile still on her lips. Xavier sat there in the howling wind for a moment, holding this stranger who had just entrusted him with her most precious treasures, feeling the weight of that promise settle onto his shoulders like a physical thing. The two little girls began to cry, and that snapped Xavier back to action. He could grieve later. Right now, he had to get these children to safety, or their mother's sacrifice would be for nothing. He gently closed Genevieve's eyes and murmured a prayer over her body. Then he wrapped the shawl more tightly around the twins and lifted them both, one in each arm. They were so light, so small. They clung to each other even as he carried them, their little hands clasped together. He managed to get them settled in front of his saddle, wrapped in his own coat now as well as their mother's things. He marked the location carefully in his mind, knowing he would have to come back for Genevieve's body once the storm passed. She deserved a proper burial. Mounting behind the girls with difficulty, Xavier urged Copper forward. The horse seemed to understand the urgency, pressing on through the storm even as the snow grew deeper. Xavier kept the girls pressed against his chest, trying to share what body heat he could, talking to them constantly to keep them awake. "You are going to be all right," he told them over and over. "I've got you now, you are safe. I promised your mama and I keep my promises." The ride to his cabin felt like it took years, though it was probably only an hour. By the time the small structure came into view through the snow, Xavier could barely feel his hands or feet. He half fell from the saddle, clutching the girls, and managed to kick open his door. The cabin was cold, the fire long dead, but it was shelter from the wind. Xavier laid the girls on his bed and immediately set about building a fire. His fingers were so numb he could barely strike the flint, but he persisted, blowing on the sparks until they caught. Once the fire was blazing, he turned his attention back to the twins. They had stopped crying and were watching him with identical pairs of blue eyes, still holding hands. They looked so much alike that Xavier wondered how anyone could tell them apart. Both had dark blonde curls plastered to their heads with melting snow, round faces with button noses, and that same solemn expression. "Let us get you out of these wet clothes," Xavier said gently, trying to remember what little he knew about children. His own mother had died when he was young, but he recalled her being gentle and calm. He tried to channel that now, moving slowly and speaking softly. The girls did not protest as he peeled off their wet dresses and wrapped them in his dry shirts, which were huge on them but warm. He found some wool socks and pulled them onto their tiny feet. Then he heated water and made them drink some warm broth from his supplies, spooning it into their mouths carefully. They drank obediently, their eyes never leaving his face. When they finished, one of them finally spoke. "Where is Mama?" she asked in a small voice. Xavier's throat tightened. He had never been good with words, but he knew he had to be honest with them. "Your mama was very sick from the cold," he said gently. "She went to heaven, sweetheart. But before she did, she made me promise to take care of you. She loved you both so very much." Both girls began to cry then, quietly, tears streaming down their faces. Xavier felt his own eyes burn. He pulled them both into his arms, these two little souls who had just lost everything, and held them while they grieved. "I know," he murmured. "I know it hurts, but I made your mama a promise and I am going to keep it. You are not alone. You have each other and now you have me." They cried themselves to sleep eventually, curled together in his bed. Xavier sat in his chair by the fire, watching them, and wondered what on earth he had gotten himself into. He was a cowboy, a loner. What did he know about raising children? Little girls at that, who would need things he could not even begin to imagine. But a promise was a promise. And when he thought of Genevieve, giving up her own life to save her daughters, asking a complete stranger to love them, he knew he could not break his word. Whatever it took, he would figure it out. The storm raged for 2 more days. Xavier kept the fire burning and did his best to care for the twins. He learned that Grace was indeed the one with the birthmark, and Gabriella was the one who reached for things with her left hand. Grace was slightly bolder, asking questions in her small voice, while Gabriella was quieter, watching everything with serious eyes. They asked for their mother constantly, and each time Xavier had to gently remind them that she was gone. It broke his heart every time. He told them stories he remembered from his own childhood and sang them the few songs he knew, though his voice was rough and untrained. He made them simple meals from his supplies and kept them warm and dry. On the 3rd day, the storm finally broke. Xavier wrapped the girls in blankets and took them into Florissant, leading Copper with them balanced in the saddle. The town was small, just a few dozen buildings clustered in a valley, but it had everything they needed, including Dr. Samuel Henderson. The doctor examined the twins carefully while Xavier waited anxiously. When he emerged from the examination room, he was smiling. "They are healthy," he reported. "Cold exposure, certainly, and they are undernourished, but nothing that good food and warmth will not fix. You did well, Xavier. Getting them to shelter when you did save their lives." "Their mother saved their lives," Xavier corrected quietly. He explained what had happened, and the doctor's expression grew somber. "A terrible tragedy," he said, "but she chose well. You are a good man, Xavier. Those girls are fortunate to have you." Xavier was not so sure about that, but he thanked the doctor and paid him with most of the money he had earned from the cattle drive. Then he took the girls to the general store, where Mrs. Martha Patterson took one look at them and immediately began gathering supplies. "These poor darlings," she said, her round face full of compassion. "They need proper clothes, Xavier, and shoes, and 100 other things. Do you even have beds for them?" "I have one bed," Xavier admitted. "They have been sharing it." Martha shook her head, but she was smiling. "We will fix that, don't you worry. The whole town will help. That is what we do here." And help they did. By the end of the day, Xavier's cabin had been transformed. Someone donated a small bed frame, and Martha provided mattresses and blankets. The girls now had several dresses each, proper shoes, coats, and all manner of necessities Xavier would never have thought of. The women of Florissant took turns visiting, showing Xavier how to braid hair and cook foods children would eat, and a dozen other things he needed to know. Through it all, Grace and Gabriella stayed close to each other, watching their new world with wide eyes. They were quiet, subdued by grief, but occasionally Xavier would catch a glimpse of who they must have been before. Grace would smile at something, or Gabriella would hum a little tune, and it gave him hope. 2 weeks after finding them, Xavier made the trip back to the spot where Genevieve had died. He brought several men from town with him, including the pastor. They found her body exactly where he had left her, preserved by the cold, still beautiful even in death. They wrapped her carefully and brought her back to Florissant, where she was buried in the small cemetery on the hill. Xavier brought the girls to the funeral, unsure if it was the right thing to do, but feeling they needed to say goodbye. They stood on either side of him, holding his hands as Pastor William said words over the grave. When it was time, Xavier helped them place wildflowers on the fresh earth. "Goodbye, Mama," Grace whispered. "We love you," Gabriella added. Xavier's eyes burned with unshed tears. He had not cried since he was a boy, but something about these two small girls and their brave mother had cracked something open inside him. That night, as he tucked them into their new bed, Grace looked up at him with those serious blue eyes. "Are you our papa now?" she asked. Xavier's breath caught. He had not thought about what they would call him, what he would be to them. "I suppose I am," he said slowly, "if you want me to be." "Mama said you would take care of us," Gabriella said. "She said you promised." "I did promise," Xavier confirmed. "And I always keep my promises." "Then you can be our papa," Grace decided with the simple logic of a child. "Our other papa died. Mama said he went to heaven too. Now we have you." "Now you have me," Xavier agreed, his voice rough. "And I am never going to let anything bad happen to you, do you understand? You are my girls now." They smiled at him, the first real smiles he had seen from them, and Xavier felt something shift in his chest. These were his daughters now, not by birth, but by choice and by promise. He would move heaven and earth to give them the life their mother had wanted for them. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Spring came to Colorado, melting the snow and bringing wildflowers to the meadows. Xavier adjusted to his new life as a father, learning as he went. He took jobs that allowed him to be home more, breaking horses and doing ranch work for the larger spreads in the area. The girls went with him everywhere, learning to love the outdoors and animals as much as he did. They were bright children, curious and quick to learn. Xavier taught them to ride, starting them on gentle old ponies. He taught them about the land, how to read the weather and find water and identify plants. At night, he read to them from the few books he owned, and they would sit on either side of him, following along with the words. The town embraced them fully. Martha Patterson became like a grandmother to the girls, teaching them things Xavier could not. The school teacher, Miss Sarah Collins, offered to tutor them until they were old enough for proper school. Dr. Henderson checked on them regularly, always pronouncing them healthier and happier. But there was a problem that Xavier had not anticipated. The law. Sheriff Tom Bradley stopped by the cabin one warm afternoon in May, his expression apologetic. "Xavier, we need to talk," he said. Xavier sent the girls to play outside and offered the sheriff coffee. "What is this about, Tom?" "Judge Morrison is coming through next week," Tom said. "He heard about the girls, about how you found them. He wants to make sure everything is legal and proper." Xavier's jaw tightened. "They are orphans. Their mother asked me to take care of them." "I know that, and everyone in town knows that," Tom said. "But the law says orphans should go to proper authorities. There is an orphanage in Denver. And without legal paperwork, without an official adoption, the judge could decide the girls need to be placed there." "No," Xavier said flatly. "I promised their mother, these girls are not going to any orphanage." "I am on your side," Tom said, holding up his hands. "But you need to make this legal, Xavier. You need to formally adopt them. That way no one can take them from you." Xavier had not thought about official adoption. He had simply taken the girls in, and that had seemed enough. But now he realized his mistake. Without legal standing, the girls could be taken from him at any moment. "How do I do that?" he asked. "You will need to petition the judge when he arrives," Tom explained. "Prove you can provide for them. Show that they are healthy and cared for. Get testimonies from townspeople. I will help you." "We all will." The next week was frantic. Xavier gathered letters of recommendation from everyone he knew. Martha Patterson wrote a glowing account of how well he cared for the girls. Dr. Henderson provided medical records showing they were thriving. Pastor Williams testified to Xavier's character. Even the girls' tutor, Miss Sarah Collins, wrote about how bright and well-adjusted they were. Judge Morrison was a stern-looking man with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes. He set up court in the small town hall, and Xavier appeared before him with Grace and Gabriella on either side, both dressed in their best clothes, their hair neatly braided. The judge reviewed all the paperwork, then looked at Xavier. "Mr. Johnson, you are unmarried, correct?" "Yes, sir." "And you work as a cowboy and horsebreaker, not the most stable occupation for raising children." "I take jobs close to home now," Xavier said. "I provide well for the girls. We have a good home, food, everything they need." "Material needs are not the only needs children have," the judge said. "Especially young girls. They need a mother figure, a woman's influence." Xavier felt his temper rise but kept it in check. "With respect, Your Honor, these girls have the whole town looking after them. Martha Patterson teaches them cooking and sewing. Miss Collins tutors them. They have plenty of good women in their lives. But no mother," the judge said pointedly. He looked at the girls. "Do you like living with Mr. Johnson?" "Yes, sir," Grace said promptly. "He is our papa. He tells us stories," Gabriella added shyly, "and he keeps us safe. Like he promised Mama." The judge's expression softened slightly. "You remember your mother?" Both girls nodded. "Papa tells us about her," Grace said, "so we do not forget. He says she was very brave and she loved us very much." Judge Morrison studied them for a long moment, then looked at Xavier. "You have done well with them, Mr. Johnson. That much is clear, but I worry about the future. What happens when these girls are older, when they need things a man cannot provide?" "Then I will find a way to provide them," Xavier said firmly. "I made a promise to their mother with her dying breath. I will not break that promise, Your Honor. Those girls are mine in every way that matters." The judge sat back, considering. The entire town seemed to hold its breath. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. I am granting the adoption. Grace and Gabriella Knightley are now legally your daughters, Mr. Johnson, but I will be checking in periodically. If I find they are not being properly cared for, I can reverse this decision." "You will find they are thriving," Xavier promised. And they were. The formal adoption seemed to settle something in the girls. They began calling Xavier Papa without hesitation, and the sad shadows that had lingered in their eyes began to fade. They laughed more, played more, became the happy children they should have been. Summer arrived in full force, hot and bright. Xavier took the girls fishing in the streams and taught them to swim in the deeper pools. They picked berries together and learned to identify animal tracks. In the evenings, they would sit on the porch of the cabin, watching the sun set over the mountains, and Xavier would tell them stories about their mother. "She loved you so much that she gave everything to save you," he would say. "She was the bravest person I ever met. And she is watching over you from heaven, proud of the good girls you are." On June 10th, he threw them a birthday party. The whole town came, bringing gifts and food. The girls turned 4 years old, blowing out candles on a cake that Martha had made. They were beaming with joy, surrounded by people who loved them, and Xavier felt a satisfaction deeper than anything he had known before. That night after the party, as he tucked them into bed, Grace looked at him seriously. "Papa, are you happy?" she asked. Xavier was surprised by the question. "Of course I am. Why do you ask? You look sad sometimes," she said. "When you think we are not looking." He had not realized they noticed. "I am not sad, sweetheart. I am just tired sometimes." "Martha says you need a wife," Gabriella announced matter-of-factly. "She says every man needs a good woman." Xavier laughed despite himself. "Martha talks too much. I have everything I need right here." But as he left their room, he found himself thinking about what the judge had said and what the girls had noticed. Was he lonely? He supposed he was, sometimes. He had gotten used to living alone before the girls came, but now the cabin felt full and warm. Yet there were moments, late at night when the girls were asleep, when he felt the weight of doing everything alone. He pushed the thoughts away. He had the girls. That was enough. It had to be enough. Autumn came, and with it the school term. Grace and Gabriella started attending the small schoolhouse in town with the other children. Xavier worried about how they would adjust, but he needn't have. They were bright and eager to learn, and their sweet natures quickly won them friends. He established a routine, bringing them to school each morning and picking them up each afternoon. While they were in class, he worked, breaking horses or helping at the various ranches around Florissant. The work was hard but steady, and he was earning enough to provide well for his daughters. It was on one of these school runs that everything changed. Xavier was waiting outside the schoolhouse, leaning against the hitching post when a wagon pulled up. The driver was a woman, and Xavier straightened automatically, prepared to offer assistance. But when she turned to look at him, his breath caught in his chest. She had dark auburn hair pulled back in a simple bun, warm brown eyes, and a face that was lovely in its kindness rather than classical beauty. She was probably close to his own age, maybe a few years younger, and there was something about her that immediately drew his attention. "Good afternoon," she said with a smile. "I am looking for the schoolhouse. This is my first day." "It is right there," Xavier said, finding his voice and gesturing to the building. "Are you the new teacher?" "Assistant teacher," she corrected. "Miss Collins wrote to me about the position. I am Gloria Kerrigan." She extended her hand and Xavier shook it, noting the calluses that suggested she was no stranger to hard work. "Xavier Johnson, pleased to meet you." "Johnson," she repeated thoughtfully. "Oh, you must be the father of the twins, Grace and Gabriella. Miss Collins has told me so much about them." "She says they are wonderful students," pride swelled in Xavier's chest. "They are good girls, smart as whips, both of them." "I look forward to teaching them," Gloria said. Then the school bell rang and she smiled apologetically. "I should go. It was nice meeting you, Mr. Johnson." "Likewise, Miss Kerrigan." Xavier watched her go, something stirring in his chest that he had not felt in years, maybe ever. He pushed it down firmly. She was a lady, a teacher, and he was just a cowboy raising two little girls. She would have no interest in someone like him. But over the following weeks, he found himself looking forward to picking up the girls from school, hoping for a few words with Gloria Kerrigan. She was always kind, always smiling, and the girls adored her. They came home every day full of stories about Miss Gloria and the wonderful things she taught them. "Miss Gloria knows so many songs," Grace reported one evening. "She taught us one about a mockingbird today. And she is teaching us to read better," Gabriella added. "She says we are her best students." Xavier smiled, pleased that they were happy. But he was also increasingly aware of Gloria herself, of the way she moved with quiet grace, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about teaching, the way she seemed genuinely interested in the girls and their well-being. Autumn deepened, the aspens turning gold on the mountainsides. One afternoon, as Xavier arrived to collect the girls, he found Gloria struggling with a large box of books that had just been delivered. "Let me help you with that," he said immediately, taking the heavy box from her. "Thank you," she said gratefully. "They sent more primers than I expected." "Where should I put them? Show me." He followed her into the schoolhouse, which was empty now except for Miss Collins in her office. Gloria directed him to a shelf, and he set the box down carefully. "The girls talk about you constantly," Gloria said as she began unpacking the books. "They think the world of you. The feeling is mutual," Xavier said. "They are the best thing that ever happened to me." "Miss Collins told me the story of how you found them," Gloria said softly. "That was a remarkable thing you did, Mr. Johnson, taking them in, raising them as your own." "I made a promise to their mother," Xavier said simply, "and they deserved a home." Gloria looked at him with something in her eyes that made his heart beat faster. "Still, many men would not have done it, especially not unmarried men. You have a good heart." Xavier felt heat rise to his face, unused to such direct praise. "I am just doing my best." "It shows," Gloria said. "The girls are thriving. That is all because of you." They talked for a while longer, and Xavier found himself more relaxed than he had been around a woman in years. Gloria was easy to talk to, interested in his stories about the ranch work and the mountains. She told him about her own life, growing up in Kansas, teaching in various schools, eventually making her way to Colorado. "I have always loved the mountains," she said. "Something about them makes me feel closer to God, more aware of how big the world is." "I know what you mean," Xavier said. "I have lived in these mountains my whole life, cannot imagine being anywhere else." When he finally left to collect the girls from where they were playing outside, his heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. He tried to tell himself it meant nothing, that it was just a pleasant conversation. But he knew he was lying to himself. Over the next few weeks, Xavier found excuses to spend more time at the school. He fixed a loose step on the porch. He replaced a broken window. He helped move furniture when Gloria wanted to rearrange the classroom. Each time they talked, and each time he found himself more drawn to her. The girls noticed, of course. Children always did. "Papa likes Miss Gloria," Grace announced one evening at dinner with the casual certainty of a 4-year-old. Xavier nearly choked on his food. "What makes you say that?" "You smile when you talk to her," Gabriella said. "And you get all quiet and strange." "I do not get quiet and strange." Both girls looked at him with identical skeptical expressions, and Xavier had to laugh. "All right, maybe I do. Miss Gloria is a very nice lady." "You want to marry her?" Grace asked. "Grace." "That is not an appropriate question." "Martha says you should," Gabriella informed him. "She says Miss Gloria would make a good mother for us." "Martha needs to mind her own business," Xavier muttered, but he was smiling. The truth was, he had been thinking about marriage, about Gloria specifically. But he had no idea if she would have any interest in him. She was educated, refined. He was rough and unpolished, a man who made his living with his hands and his back. But the girls had planted the seed, and it grew in his mind. What if he tried? What was the worst that could happen? She could say no, and he would be embarrassed, but at least he would know. The opportunity came in early November. The town was planning a harvest dance, and everyone would be attending. Xavier had never been much for dancing, but the girls were excited about it, and he found himself hoping Gloria would be there. She was, wearing a simple but pretty blue dress, her hair done up in a way that made Xavier's breath catch. He watched her from across the room for most of the evening, working up his courage, while the girls played with their friends. Finally, Martha Patterson appeared at his elbow. "For goodness sake, Xavier, go ask that girl to dance before someone else does." "I am not much of a dancer," Xavier admitted. "So, neither is anyone else here. Go on." With Martha practically pushing him, Xavier crossed the room to where Gloria stood talking with Miss Collins. His heart was pounding ridiculously hard for a man who had faced down wild horses and mountain lions without flinching. "Miss Kerrigan," he said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended, "would you care to dance?" Gloria's face lit up with a smile that made the walk across the room worth every bit of nervousness. "I would love to, Mr. Johnson." He led her onto the floor as the small band struck up a waltz. Xavier placed his hand carefully at her waist, took her hand in his, and began to move. He was not graceful, but he knew the basic steps and Gloria followed his lead easily. "You dance better than you suggested," she said with a teasing smile. "My mother taught me before she died," Xavier said. "Said every man should know how to dance with a lady." She was right. They moved together in silence for a moment, and Xavier found himself very aware of the warmth of her hand in his, the faint scent of lavender that clung to her hair. "The girls are wonderful," Gloria said after a moment. "You have done an amazing job with them, Xavier." It was the first time she had used his given name, and it sent a thrill through him. "Thank you, Gloria. That means a lot coming from you. I mean it. They are bright and kind and so full of love. That is all because of you." Xavier looked at her, at the sincerity in her eyes, and felt his courage rise. "Can I be honest with you about something?" "Of course." "I have been thinking about you a lot lately," he said. "More than is probably proper. And I know I am just a cowboy and you are a teacher, and maybe this is presumptuous of me, but I would like to court you, if you would allow it." Gloria stopped dancing, and for a heart-stopping moment, Xavier thought he had made a terrible mistake. But then she smiled, a beautiful, genuine smile that transformed her whole face. "I would like that very much," she said softly. "I have been thinking about you too, Xavier, and those girls. I would very much like to get to know all of you better." Relief and joy flooded through Xavier. "Really?" "Really?" She squeezed his hand. "Now, shall we continue dancing? Everyone is staring." He laughed and swept her back into the waltz, feeling lighter than air. Across the room, he could see Grace and Gabriella watching with identical delighted grins, and Martha Patterson giving him a satisfied nod. The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Xavier's life. He took things slowly, mindful of the girls and what they needed. But Gloria fit into their lives as if she had always been meant to be there. She came to dinner at the cabin, helping him cook and laughing at his kitchen disasters. She went on rides with them through the mountains, proving to be an excellent horsewoman. She read to the girls at night, teaching them new songs and games. Most importantly, she loved the girls and they loved her back. Not in replacement of their mother, whom Xavier made sure they never forgot, but as a new presence in their lives, warm and caring and constant. Christmas came, and Xavier gave Gloria a simple necklace he had commissioned from the town jeweler. It was a silver chain with a small pendant shaped like a mountain peak. When he gave it to her, his hands were shaking. "It reminded me of how you said the mountains make you feel closer to God," he explained. "I wanted you to have something that represents that." Gloria's eyes filled with tears as she put it on. "It is perfect, Xavier. Thank you." "There is something else," Xavier said, aware of Grace and Gabriella watching from the corner, barely containing their excitement. He dropped to one knee, pulling out a simple gold band. "Gloria, I know we have not been courting long, but I know my heart. I love you, the girls love you, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Gloria's tears spilled over, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Xavier, I will marry you." The girls erupted in cheers, rushing over to hug both of them. Xavier stood and pulled Gloria into his arms, kissing her for the first time while his daughters danced around them in joy. It felt like every piece of his life had finally fallen into place. They were married in early January 1879, in a small ceremony at the Florissant Church with the whole town in attendance. Grace and Gabriella served as flower girls, wearing matching white dresses and beaming with pride. When Xavier and Gloria exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives, he felt tears in his eyes for only the second time since childhood. The first had been the day Genevieve died. Now, these were tears of joy. Gloria moved into the cabin, and suddenly it was a home in every sense of the word. She brought warmth and laughter and a woman's touch. She made curtains for the windows and planted a garden in the spring. She taught the girls to cook and sew, read to them every night and tucked them in with kisses. But more than that, she and Xavier built a partnership. She challenged him intellectually, discussing books and ideas. She supported his work, understanding the demands of ranch life. And she loved him with a steadiness and strength that sometimes took his breath away. The physical side of their marriage was a revelation to Xavier. He had been with women before, but never with this level of intimacy and connection. Learning Gloria's body, finding ways to bring her pleasure, falling asleep with her in his arms every night, it was better than anything he had imagined. One night, several months into their marriage, as they lay in bed listening to the wind outside, Gloria turned to him. "I want to have a baby," she said softly. "With you. I love the girls so much, but I want to carry your child." Xavier pulled her closer, kissing her forehead. "I would like that too. A house full of children sounds perfect to me." By summer, Gloria was pregnant. The girls were excited about becoming big sisters, constantly talking to her belly and asking when the baby would arrive. Xavier found himself both terrified and elated, remembering Genevieve and the risks of childbirth, but trying to trust that everything would be all right. In late winter, on a cold February night, Gloria went into labor. Dr. Henderson was there, and Martha Patterson, and Xavier paced the floor of his own cabin feeling more helpless than he ever had in his life. The girls, staying with Miss Collins for the night, would be wondering what was happening. It was a long labor, lasting through the night and into the morning. When Xavier finally heard a baby's cry, he nearly collapsed with relief. Martha emerged a few minutes later, beaming. "You have a son," she announced, "and Gloria is doing fine. Come meet your boy." Xavier went into the bedroom on shaking legs. Gloria was propped up in bed, pale and exhausted but radiantly happy, holding a tiny bundle. When she looked up at him, her smile was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "Look," she whispered. "Look at what we made." Xavier approached carefully and looked down at his son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was waving tiny fists in the air. He was perfect, absolutely perfect. "What should we name him?" Gloria asked. Xavier thought for a moment. "What about William, after my father, William Johnson?" Gloria said, testing it out. "I like it. Hello, William. Welcome to the world." Xavier sat on the edge of the bed, wrapping his arms around his wife and new son, feeling a love so profound it was almost painful. 5 years ago, he had been alone, a solitary cowboy with nothing but his horse and his cabin. Now he had a wife, 3 children, and a life full of meaning and purpose, all because of a promise made in a snowstorm to a dying woman. When the girls came home that afternoon and met their baby brother, their faces lit up with wonder. Grace carefully touched William's tiny hand and Gabriella cooed at him. "He is so small," Grace whispered in awe. "You were that small once," Xavier told them. "Even smaller. And now look at you, big strong girls who can read and ride horses." "We will teach him everything," Gabriella promised seriously. "We will be the best big sisters." And they were. As William grew, the twins doted on him, helping Gloria with feedings and diaper changes, entertaining him with songs and games. The cabin was full of noise and laughter and love. Xavier expanded his work, taking a position as foreman on one of the larger ranches. The steady income allowed him to build an addition onto the cabin, adding more bedrooms and space for their growing family. Gloria continued to teach part-time, bringing home books and learning materials for the children. The years passed in a blur of happiness. Grace and Gabriella grew into bright, beautiful girls who excelled in school and were beloved by everyone who knew them. William was a rambunctious, cheerful boy who followed his sisters everywhere. In 1881, Gloria gave birth to another son, Henry, and 2 years after that, a daughter named Caroline. The house was chaotic and messy and absolutely full of love. Xavier sometimes had to pinch himself to believe it was real. He, who had expected to live and die alone, now had a wife he adored and 5 children who called him Papa. He never let Grace and Gabriella forget their birth mother. On the anniversary of Genevieve's death each year, they would ride up to her grave on the hill, bringing flowers and sharing memories. Xavier made sure the girls knew how much their mother had loved them, how brave she had been. "She gave her life for us," he would tell them. "And then she trusted me with her most precious treasures. That is not something I take lightly." As the girls grew older, they understood more. When they turned 10, Xavier gave them each a journal and asked them to write down everything they remembered about their mother and everything he had told them, so they would never forget. "We will tell our own children about her someday," Grace said seriously. "About how brave she was." "And about how you found us," Gabriella added. "About the promise you made." "That promise changed my life," Xavier said truthfully. "Before you girls came into my world, I was just drifting. You gave me purpose, and you brought me your mama." He gestured to where Gloria was playing with the younger children. "I would not have any of this without you." Life was not without challenges, of course. There were hard winters and lean times, illnesses and injuries. William broke his arm falling from a tree when he was 6. Caroline had a terrifying bout of pneumonia when she was 2. The ranch Xavier worked on struggled during a particularly bad drought, but through it all, the family held together. Xavier and Gloria faced everything as partners, supporting each other through the hard times and celebrating the good. The children grew up secure in the knowledge that they were loved beyond measure. When Grace and Gabriella turned 16 in 1890, Xavier looked at them with a mixture of pride and melancholy. They were young women now, beautiful and poised and intelligent. They had their mother's green eyes, though their features were their own. Young men were starting to come calling, and Xavier had to resist the urge to chase them all off. "They are not little girls anymore," Gloria reminded him gently when he grumbled about some boy who had asked to take Grace on a walk. "We raised them to be strong and independent. Now we have to trust them." "I know," Xavier sighed. "But it feels like just yesterday I was pulling them out of that snowbank." 12 years ago, Gloria said. 12 years of watching them thrive and grow. Their mother would be so proud of them, Xavier, and so proud of you." Xavier pulled Gloria into his arms, resting his chin on top of her head. "I could not have done any of this without you. You know that, right? You made us a family." "We made each other a family," Gloria corrected. "You, me, the girls, all the children. That is what family is, choosing each other every day." As the years continued to roll by, the children began leaving the nest one by one. Grace married a kind young man who owned a ranch near Denver when she was 19. Gabriella became a teacher like Gloria, eventually taking over the Florissant school when Miss Collins retired. She married at 21 to a lawyer who had moved to town and fallen instantly in love with her. Both girls insisted on being married from their childhood home, with Xavier walking them down the aisle. At each wedding, he thought of Genevieve, wishing she could see how wonderfully her daughters had turned out. But he felt her presence, a warmth in his heart that told him she knew that she was watching and approving. William grew up to be a talented horseman like his father, eventually buying his own small ranch. Henry became a doctor, inspired by Dr. Henderson, who had cared for the family for so many years. Caroline, the baby, inherited her mother's love of teaching and her father's adventurous spirit, announcing when she was 15 that she wanted to travel and see the world. "Over my dead body," Xavier said, but he was smiling. He knew he would let her go when the time came. His children were meant to fly, not be caged. By 1895, Xavier was 53 years old, his hair shot through with gray, his face lined by sun and wind and smiles. Gloria was 47, still beautiful, still the steady presence at the center of their family. They were grandparents now, with Grace and Gabriella each having babies of their own. One summer evening, as they sat on the porch of their home watching the sun set over the mountains, Gloria took his hand. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked. "The day you found the girls?" "All the time," Xavier admitted. "It was the worst and best day of my life. Worst because of watching Genevieve die knowing I could not save her. Best because it brought the girls into my life, which eventually brought you." "Do you think things happen for a reason?" Gloria asked. "That you were meant to find them that day." Xavier considered this. He was not a particularly philosophical man, but he had thought about this question many times over the years. "I think Genevieve prayed for someone to save her daughters, and God put me in the right place at the right time. I think she saw something in me that I did not see in myself. She trusted me to love them, and that trust changed me." "You were always a good man," Gloria said. "She just helped you see it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade from the sky. The house behind them was quiet now, with all the children grown and gone, but it still felt full of love and memories. "Do you have any regrets?" Gloria asked. "Not a single one," Xavier said truthfully. "I have lived a good life, Gloria, better than I ever imagined possible. I have been loved by a wonderful woman. I have raised 5 amazing children. I have worked hard and built something meaningful. What more could a man ask for?" "Nothing," Gloria agreed. She leaned her head on his shoulder. "We have been very blessed." The years continued, slower now, quieter. Xavier retired from the ranch at 55, content to tend his own property and spend time with his growing number of grandchildren. Gloria retired from teaching at 50, though she tutored students privately and remained a beloved figure in Florissant. They traveled a bit, visiting their children in various parts of Colorado. Grace had 4 children now, living a life much like the one Xavier had built. Gabriella had 3, all of them bright and precocious. William had 2 sons who were already showing promise as horsemen. Henry was unmarried, too focused on his medical practice. Caroline had indeed traveled, spending several years working as a teacher in different towns, before returning to Florissant and settling down with a rancher's son. Each of the children, in their own way, carried forward the lessons Xavier and Gloria had taught them. Work hard. Love deeply. Keep your promises. Family matters most. On June 10, 1900, the entire family gathered at Xavier and Gloria's home to celebrate Grace and Gabriella's birthday. They were 26 years old now, mothers themselves, but they still insisted on celebrating together as they had since childhood. The house was full of people, 3 generations gathered around tables groaning with food. Children ran and played in the yard. The adults talked and laughed and shared stories. Xavier stood on the porch watching it all and felt his heart swell with gratitude. Grace found him there, her oldest son balanced on her hip. "What are you thinking about, Papa?" she asked. "Your mother," Xavier said. "Your birth mother." Wondering what she would think if she could see this. "See you." Grace smiled, her eyes getting misty. "I think she would be happy. I think she would say thank you for keeping your promise." "I would do it again in a heartbeat," Xavier said. "Every single day I would make the same choice." Gabriella joined them, followed by William, Henry, and Caroline. All 5 of his children standing together, looking at him with love and respect. Xavier felt tears prick his eyes. "I need to say something to all of you," he said. "I need you to know how proud I am of all of you. You have grown into remarkable people. You are kind and strong and good. You make the world better just by being in it. We learned from the best, William said. Your mother and I did our best, Xavier said, but the rest was you. You chose who to become, and you chose well. Gloria appeared in the doorway, smiling at the sight of their children gathered together. Dinner is ready, she announced. Come inside before the grandchildren eat everything. The family moved inside and Xavier followed, Gloria's hand in his. As they sat down around the table, surrounded by the people they loved most, Xavier said a silent prayer of gratitude. Thank you for that day in the snow. Thank you for Genevieve's trust. Thank you for Grace and Gabriella. Thank you for Gloria. Thank you for this family, this life, this love. The years moved on as they always do. Xavier and Gloria grew older together, their love deepening with time. They lost friends, said goodbye to contemporaries, but they had each other and their children and their grandchildren. In 1905, when Xavier was 63 and Gloria 59, they decided to take a trip. Just the two of them, back to the place where it had all begun. They rode up into the mountains on a clear summer day, following the old trail until they reached the spot where Xavier had found Genevieve and the twins. It looked different now, 27 years later. But Xavier could still see it, the snowbank, the dying woman, the shivering girls. He could still hear her voice, asking him to promise. You think she knows? Gloria asked quietly. Wherever she is, do you think she knows how everything turned out? I believe she does, Xavier said. I have to believe she sees them, sees how happy they are, how good they have become. I hope it gives her peace. They stood together in silence for a while, then Xavier spoke again. Genevieve Knightley, if you can hear me, I want you to know I kept my promise. I loved your girls like my own. I gave them the best life I could. They grew up strong and happy, and now they are giving that same love to their own children. You saved their lives with your sacrifice, and they have made that sacrifice worth it. I hope you are proud. I hope you are at peace. Gloria squeezed his hand, tears running down her face. Xavier felt his own tears fall freely, something he no longer tried to hide. Some things were worth crying over. They rode back down the mountain as the sun began to set, back to the home they had built, the life they had made. That night as they lay in bed, Gloria curled against Xavier's chest. I love you, she said. I have loved you from the moment you asked me to dance. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too, Xavier said. You are the other half of my soul, Gloria. Everything good in my life came from you. They were both getting older now, feeling the weight of years in their bones and joints. But they were together, and that made everything bearable. They spent their days in simple pleasures, tending their garden, reading, spending time with grandchildren who came to visit. Xavier was 70 when he finally had to admit that his body was failing. The hard years of ranch work had taken their toll. His hands shook with arthritis, his back ached constantly. Gloria was not much better, struggling with her own health issues. But they cared for each other, patient and tender. Grace and Gabriella came to help, moving back to Florissant with their families for a while to care for their aging parents. William took over the property, managing it so his father could rest. Henry provided medical care, keeping them comfortable. Caroline visited as often as she could, bringing her children to cheer her parents. In the spring of 1915, Xavier knew his time was growing short. He was 73, had lived a long and good life. Gloria was 67, still strong but tired. They sat together on the porch one evening, wrapped in blankets against the chill, watching the mountains turn purple in the fading light. I am not afraid, Xavier said quietly. When the time comes, I am not afraid. Neither am I, Gloria said. We have had a good life, Xavier. Better than most people ever dream of. Will you do something for me? Xavier asked. When I am gone, will you make sure I am buried next to Genevieve? I want to be near her, to tell her in person that I kept my promise." Gloria smiled through her tears. "Of course. That is exactly where you should be." Xavier did not die that spring or even that summer. He held on through another year, determined to see one more Christmas with his family. When the holiday came, the house was once again full of people. His 5 children, their spouses, his 17 grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. 4 generations, all descended from the promise he had made in a snowstorm 37 years earlier. He held Gloria's hand and watched them all, memorizing every face, every laugh, every moment. This was what he had built. This was what Genevieve's trust had created. A family, a legacy, a love that would endure long after he was gone. Xavier passed away peacefully in his sleep on January 15, 1916, with Gloria beside him. His last words were, "I kept my promise." Gloria held him and wept, but through her tears, she was smiling. He had indeed kept his promise and so much more. They buried Xavier next to Genevieve, just as he had requested. The entire town came to the funeral, 3 generations of people whose lives he had touched. Grace and Gabriella stood together at the graveside, holding hands as they had as children, remembering the man who had saved them and raised them and loved them. "Thank you," Grace whispered, though whether she was speaking to her father or her birth mother or both, no one knew. Gloria lived for 5 more years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. She spent her days writing down family stories, making sure that future generations would know about Xavier and Genevieve, about the promise and the family it had created. When she died in 1921 at the age of 73, she was buried on Xavier's other side, completing the circle. The family Xavier and Gloria built continued to grow and flourish. Their descendants spread across Colorado and beyond, but they always came back to Florissant, to the mountains, to the place where their family began. They told the story to their children and grandchildren, the story of the cowboy who found 2 girls in a snowbank and made a promise that changed his world. Grace's great-granddaughter, another Genevieve, became a writer and eventually published the story as a book, making sure that the sacrifice and love and promise would never be forgotten. Gabriella's grandson became a historian, documenting the early days of Florissant, and making sure his great-grandfather's legacy was preserved. The cabin where Xavier and Gloria raised their family was eventually turned into a small museum, maintained by the family and the town. Visitors could walk through the rooms where 5 children had grown up, see the porch where Xavier and Gloria had spent countless evenings, stand in the place where love and promise had built something beautiful. And up on the hill, 3 graves stood together under the whispering pines. Genevieve Knightley, who had sacrificed everything for her daughters. Xavier Johnson, who had kept his promise and built a family from that sacrifice. And Gloria Johnson, who had brought love and completion to both their legacies. On June 10th every year, their descendants gathered at those graves, bringing flowers and sharing stories. The tradition had started with Grace and Gabriella and continued through every generation. They would stand together, however many of them there were, and remember. Remember that love is a choice and a promise. Remember that family is not just blood but commitment. Remember that one moment of courage, one act of selflessness, one promise kept can change the world. The story of the cowboy and the twin girls in the snowbank became legend in Florissant, told and retold, inspiring people to their own acts of courage and love. It reminded them that even in the harsh reality of the Wild West, even in the face of death and loss, hope and love could prevail. And somewhere, perhaps Three souls looked down on the family they had created together and smiled. The promise had been kept, the love had endured, and the legacy would continue for generations to come. A testament to the power of choosing love even in the darkest moments, of keeping promises even when they are hard, of building families not from blood alone but from commitment and sacrifice and grace. The mountains stood eternal above Florissant, watching over the graves and the town and the descendants of those who had loved so deeply. Snow still fell in the winters, reminding everyone of that fateful day when everything changed. But now it was a reminder not just of loss, but of hope, not just of death, but of the life that could come from sacrifice. And if you walked through Florissant on a quiet evening, listening carefully, you might hear echoes of laughter from a cabin full of children, the sound of a couple murmuring to each other on a porch, the whisper of a promise made and kept. I will love them as my own. That promise had changed one cowboy's world. But in the end, it had changed the world for countless others, rippling out through generations, proving that love, once given freely and kept faithfully, never truly dies. It lives on in every child raised with love, every promise kept, every family built not just from blood but from choice and commitment and grace. And that, truly, was the legacy of Xavier Johnson, Genevieve Knightley, and Gloria Johnson. A love that transcended death, a family that grew from tragedy, and a promise that changed the world one life at a time for generation after generation after generation. The end came not with sorrow but with celebration, not with loss but with gratitude for what had been built from that single moment of courage in a snowstorm so many years ago. And in that way, the story never really ended at all. It simply continued, passed down through the years, a reminder that the best things in life come not from ease but from sacrifice, not from chance but from choice, not from comfort but from courage. Xavier Johnson had been just a cowboy riding through a blizzard, but he became so much more. He became a father, a husband, a grandfather, a legend. He became proof that ordinary people, when called upon, can do extraordinary things, that promises matter, that love endures, that family in the end is what we make it. And all of it started with two little girls shivering in a snowbank, a dying mother's desperate plea, and a cowboy who said yes when he could have said no, who made a promise when he could have walked away, who chose love when it would have been easier to choose solitude. That choice, that promise, that love rippled through time, touching lives that Xavier and Genevieve and Gloria would never meet but whose existence was shaped by their courage and sacrifice. Teachers and doctors and ranchers and writers, children and grandchildren and great-great-grandchildren, all carrying within them the legacy of that winter day and the promise that followed. And so the story ended where all the best stories end, with love triumphant, promises kept, and a family that would endure long after the people who started it were gone. With the certainty that what we build with love lasts forever, passed down through generations, becoming stronger rather than weaker with time. In the mountains of Colorado, in the small town of Florissant, 3 graves stood under the pines, and beneath them lay 3 people who had changed the world simply by choosing love. And around them always walked the descendants of that choice, living proof that the best things in life come not from circumstance but from courage, not from ease but from promise, not from accident but from the deliberate choice to love, even when it is hard, even when it costs everything, even when it means saying yes to a future you never imagined. That was their gift to the world. That was their legacy. That was their story, and it was beautiful,